I trusted him with my home after my husband died. He called me too emotional to understand numbers while secretly pricing it $80,000 below market to help his friend. He never expected me to bring evidence of their scheme to the signing table. The look on his face when I revealed everything in front of the buyer, his boss, and the attorney was worth every sleepless night. The morning light streamed through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the granite countertop where John and I had shared countless cups of coffee over our 32 years together. 6 months after his funeral, the silence in this house still felt wrong. I traced my finger along the edge of my wedding ring as I stared at the stack of bills. Property taxes, insurance, mortgage, medical bills from John's final months. The numbers didn't lie. I couldn't afford to keep our home. I remember the weight of my cell phone as I dialed Mark Reynolds, our friend and realtor who had helped us buy this house 15 years ago. His voice sounded too cheerful when he answered, like someone trying too hard to sound normal. "Sarah, how are you holding up?" There was something practiced in his tone, something that hadn't been there when he'd hugged me at John's funeral and promised to help with anything I needed. "I need to sell the house, Mark," I said simply, my voice steadier than I expected. "I can't manage it alone anymore." "Oh." A pause, too long. "I'm so sorry to hear that. But you know what? I'm actually the perfect person to help. The market's hot right now." He arrived the next day in a suit that looked more expensive than the one he'd worn to John's funeral. His cologne announced his presence before he even knocked. When I opened the door, his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Sarah, you look wonderful," he said, stepping past me into the entryway without waiting for an invitation. His gaze swept over the living room, not with sympathy for my loss, but with calculation. I noticed how he lingered on the built-in bookshelves John had installed, the vaulted ceilings, the stone fireplace. "Let's sit down and talk numbers first," he said, pulling out a tablet and settling onto our couch, John's spot, without asking. I made coffee while Mark typed and swiped. When I returned with 2 mugs, he was already launching into market analyses and comparable sales. The numbers blurred together as I tried to focus. I'd always left the financial decisions to John, not because I couldn't understand them, but because he enjoyed handling them while I managed other aspects of our life together. "Based on my assessment, we should list at $320,000, Mark concluded, sliding his tablet toward me with the chart displayed. "That's a fair price in this market for a quick sale." Something felt off. Our neighbour's smaller home had sold for $375,000 just last year. But Mark was the expert, and he'd been John's friend for 20 years. "That seems low," I said carefully. "The Hendersons got $375,000 for their place, and they don't have the renovated kitchen or the finished basement." Mark's smile tightened. He reached out and patted my hand like I was a child. "Sarah, the Hendersons' timing was different. The market fluctuates. And honestly, you're in a different position now. You need to sell quickly, not sit on the market for months hoping for a perfect offer." He leaned back, his voice softening with practiced sympathy. "I know this is emotional for you. This house holds so many memories with John. But trust me, you're too close to this to see the numbers clearly. Women often struggle with the financial side when their husbands handled everything." I felt heat rise to my face. John hadn't handled everything. We were partners. I ran our household budget and had built a successful small business before retiring. But Mark was already moving on, talking about staging and open houses. "I'll need you to clear out some of the personal items," he said, gesturing vaguely to the family photos on the mantel, the ones of John and me on our anniversary trip to Maine last year, the ones with our daughter and grandchildren at Christmas. "Buyers need to envision themselves here, not see your life." When he left, I sat alone at the kitchen table, my coffee gone cold. The contract he'd left for me to sign lay untouched. Something about his assessment didn't add up. I pulled out my laptop, the one John had insisted I needed to keep up with the grandkids on Facebook, and started researching recent sales in our neighborhood. After 2 hours, my suspicions had hardened into certainty. Houses comparable to mine were selling for $390,000 to $410,000. Mark's suggested listing price was at least $80,000 below market value. Maybe he thought I wouldn't notice. Maybe he thought grief had dulled my mind along with my heart. I didn't sign the contract. Instead, I called Janet, a realtor from another agency who had sold the Wilsons' house across the street. She arrived the next morning without cologne, without presumption, with a professional demeanor and actual data. "Based on the current market and your home's condition and features, I'd recommend listing at $399,950, she said, after a thorough walkthrough. It's in excellent shape, and the updates you've made to the kitchen and bathrooms add significant value. The $80,000 difference between her assessment and Mark's felt like a slap. I thanked Janet for her time, but told her I needed to think before making any decisions. That night, I couldn't sleep. Why would Mark, our friend of 20 years, undervalue my home so dramatically? The answer came in a 3 a.m. Facebook scroll. Mark had shared photos from a poker night 6 months ago. Among the players was a man named Trevor Daniels, a property developer I recognized from local business events. The caption read, "Another win for TD. This guy always comes out on top." On a hunch, I searched Trevor Daniels online and discovered he specialized in buying properties, making minimal cosmetic updates, and flipping them for substantial profits. If he could buy my house for $320,000 and sell it for $400,000 after some paint and staging, that would be an easy $80,000 profit minus expenses. The next morning, Mark called. "Sarah, I wanted to check if you've had a chance to sign that listing agreement. I've actually got a potential buyer already interested. We could potentially sell without even listing it publicly." "Who's the buyer?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. A pause. "Just someone looking in the neighborhood. Very motivated." "Does this buyer have a name?" "Trevor. Trevor Daniels. He's a great guy, very fair. He might even let you rent back for a month while you find a new place." My hand tightened around the phone. "How convenient that you already have a buyer lined up." "It is. That's why we should move quickly. In fact, I could bring the paperwork by this afternoon, and we could potentially have an offer by tomorrow." I agreed to meet him at 3 p.m. Then I made 2 calls, one to Janet for a formal written market analysis, and another to my daughter, Lisa, who works as a paralegal at a real estate law firm. "Mum, what you're describing sounds like potential broker fraud," Lisa said after I explained. "If Mark is deliberately undervaluing your home to help his friend get it below market, that's a serious ethics violation. It could even cost him his license." "What should I do?" I asked. "Gather evidence. Get that second opinion in writing. And if you want to really nail him, get him to put something in writing about why he's pricing it so low or about his relationship with this Trevor person." I sent Mark an email. "I'm concerned about the pricing. Can you explain again why you think $320,000 is appropriate when similar homes are selling for much more? Also, how do you know Trevor Daniels?" His response came quickly. "Sarah, I understand your concern, but you really need to trust me on this. The other homes you're looking at don't have the same issues as yours. Trevor is just a client I've worked with before who's looking for a property in this area. I'm trying to help you avoid the stress of a prolonged sale process. Women in your situation often find the selling process overwhelming without their husbands to guide them." There it was again, the condescension, the assumption that without John, I was incapable of understanding basic finances. I printed his email and added it to my growing file. When Mark arrived that afternoon, he brought not only the listing agreement, but also a preliminary offer from Trevor Daniels, $310,000 cash with a quick closing. "He's offering slightly below listing because he knows he'll need to update a few things," Mark explained smoothly. "But it's cash, Sarah. No financing contingencies, no waiting. You could be done with all this in 3 weeks." I nodded thoughtfully, not trusting myself to speak without revealing my anger. Mark mistook my silence for acquiescence. "I know it seems fast, but this is really the best outcome for you. The house needs work that you can't manage alone, and Trevor's being very generous considering the condition." "What condition issues?" I asked, genuinely confused. "John and I had meticulously maintained our home." Mark waved his hand dismissively. "The kitchen is dated. The master bathroom needs a complete overhaul. The HVAC system is probably on its last legs. Trevor will have to invest significant money to bring it up to market standards." Each lie made my blood pressure rise, but I kept my face neutral. "I see. And Trevor's examined the house already?" "He drove by. He trusts my assessment." Mark pushed the papers toward me. "If you sign today, we can move forward immediately." "I'd like my daughter to review these first," I said, gathering the papers. "She works in real estate law." Something flashed across Mark's face. Annoyance? Worry? Before his smile returned. "Of course, but don't take too long. Trevor's a busy man, and this offer won't wait forever." After he left, I called Lisa again. He brought an offer, $310,000 cash from Trevor Daniels, who supposedly hasn't even been inside the house. And Mark's claiming the house needs major work when it doesn't. "Mom, this is textbook. He's trying to pressure you into a quick sale at a below-market price to someone he knows. I'm coming over tonight with my boss. He'll want to see this. Lisa's boss, Richard Harmon, was a real estate attorney with 30 years of experience. He reviewed the listing agreement, the offer, and Mark's emails with increasing disbelief. Mrs. Collins, your realtor isn't just being unethical. What he's doing could be illegal. He has a fiduciary duty to represent your best interests, not his friends. And this email where he dismisses your concerns because you're a woman without a husband, that's discrimination on top of everything else. What should I do? I asked. Well, you could file a complaint with the Real Estate Commission immediately, Richard said. Or what? A smile spread across his face. Or we could set up a little meeting that gives him enough rope to hang himself. The plan was simple but effective. I would tell Mark I was ready to move forward with Trevor's offer, but I wanted to meet everyone involved at Richard's office for the signing. Richard would represent me as my attorney, but Mark wouldn't know Richard's full role until the right moment. Mark was delighted when I called to accept the offer. I knew you'd see reason, Sarah. Trevor will be thrilled. I'd like to do the signing at my daughter's law firm, I said, just to make sure everything's in order. He hesitated. That's really not necessary. We can do it at my office, or even at your kitchen table. I'd be more comfortable with my daughter present, and her boss has offered to review the documents for free. It's a small family firm, Harmon and Associates on Main Street. Thursday at 2 p.m. would work for everyone on my end. After some resistance, Mark agreed. I also made one other call to the managing broker of Mark's real estate agency, explaining that I had concerns about Mark's handling of my listing and inviting her to attend the meeting. She accepted immediately, her tone professional but concerned. On Thursday, I dressed carefully in a blue suit I hadn't worn since my retirement 5 years earlier. I brought my file of evidence in a folder that had once held John's life insurance documents. As I drove to the law office, I felt John's presence beside me, his voice in my ear. Show them what you're made of, Sarah. The conference room was imposing, with its long mahogany table and leather chairs. I arrived early with Lisa and Richard. Mark arrived next with Trevor Daniels, a younger man with an expensive haircut and a smile that reminded me of a used car salesman. They were laughing about something as they entered, but the laughter died when they saw the formal setup. Sarah, Mark said, recovering quickly. This seems very official for a simple signing. I like to do things properly, I replied, gesturing to the chairs across from me. Before they could sit, Karen Lawson, the managing broker from Mark's agency, entered the room. Mark's face registered surprise, then confusion. Karen, what are you doing here? Mrs. Collins invited me, she said, taking a seat next to me. She had some concerns about your handling of her listing. Mark's confident facade cracked slightly. There must be some misunderstanding. Everything's been completely above board. Richard cleared his throat. Shall we begin? I'm Richard Harmon, Mrs. Collins' attorney. Before we proceed with any signing, we have some questions about the valuation of the property and the circumstances of this offer. Mark shifted in his seat. The valuation is based on current market conditions and the property's specific features. I opened my folder and slid Janet's market analysis across the table. This professional assessment values my home at $399,950. That's nearly $80,000, more than your suggested listing price. Mark glanced at the paper without touching it. Different realtors have different opinions. Mine is based on my greater familiarity with this specific neighborhood. Janet has sold 3 homes on my street in the past year, I counted, all for prices consistent with her valuation of my property. Trevor Daniels interjected, Look, I'm offering cash and a quick closing. That's worth something. Richard nodded. It is indeed, Mr. Daniels, but typically not an $80,000 discount. Especially interesting given your business model of buying properties below market value, making cosmetic improvements, and reselling them at substantial profits. Trevor's eyes narrowed. How is my business relevant here? I pulled out a printout of Mark's Facebook post. You and Mark are friends, aren't you? Regular poker buddies? Mark's face flushed. We know each other socially. That's not unusual in real estate circles. Karen Lawson leaned forward. It becomes unusual, Mark, when you fail to disclose that relationship to your client while pushing her to accept a below-market offer from your friend. I wasn't pushing anything, Mark protested, his voice rising. I was trying to help Sarah avoid the stress of a lengthy sale process. She's been emotional since losing John, and women in her position often make financial mistakes when they're grieving. The room went silent. I let his words hang in the air, their condescension echoing off the walls. I have an MBA, Mark, I said quietly. I ran a successful business for 15 years before retiring. John and I made financial decisions together throughout our marriage. The only mistake I nearly made was trusting you. I pulled out his emails and placed them on the table. You repeatedly dismissed my concerns about your valuation because I'm a widow. You claimed my house needed major repairs when it doesn't. You pressured me to accept an offer from your friend without disclosing your relationship. And you deliberately undervalued my property by $80,000. Karen Lawson picked up the emails, her expression darkening as she read. Mark, these communications are completely inappropriate and potentially violate our code of ethics, not to mention state real estate regulations. Mark's composure finally broke. You're blowing this out of proportion. I was trying to help you, Sarah. The market is unpredictable, and I wanted to ensure you got a guaranteed sale. A guaranteed sale that would have cost me $80,000, I said, while your friend made a tidy profit. Trevor Daniels stood abruptly. I think we're done here. I'm withdrawing my offer. Sit down, Mr. Daniels, Richard said firmly. We haven't finished discussing the potential legal implications of what appears to be a coordinated attempt to defraud Mrs. Collins. Trevor slowly sank back into his chair, his arrogance replaced by caution. Karen turned to Mark. Consider yourself suspended pending a full investigation. I'll need your keycard and access credentials before you leave today. Mark's face went pale. You can't do that! I've been with the agency for 15 years. I can, and I am, Karen replied, and I'll be personally reviewing all of your recent transactions for similar patterns. Richard slid a document across the table. Mrs. Collins will be filing a formal complaint with the State Real Estate Commission. Given the evidence, you could be facing a suspension or revocation of your license. Mark looked desperately around the table, his confident facade completely shattered. Sarah, please, think about our friendship, about John. He wouldn't want this. I felt a calm certainty as I looked at him. John valued honesty above all else, Mark. He would be the first person to hold you accountable for trying to take advantage of me. The meeting ended with Mark and Trevor leaving separately, both avoiding eye contact with everyone. Karen stayed behind to apologize personally. Mrs. Collins, I'm deeply sorry for what happened. I assure you our agency doesn't condone any of Mark's actions. If you'd allow us, I'd like to personally handle your listing at the appropriate market value. I thanked her but declined. I've already decided to list with Janet Davis. She was honest with me from the start. 3 weeks later, my house sold for $405,000 after receiving multiple offers. The Real Estate Commission opened a formal investigation into Mark's practices, and 2 other clients came forward with similar stories. 6 months later, his license was suspended for 2 years, and he was ordered to pay restitution to the affected clients. As for me, I found a lovely 2-bedroom condo closer to Lisa and the grandchildren. It's smaller than the house John and I shared, but it's mine, and I made every decision about buying it with clear eyes and full information. The morning I moved in, I unpacked the coffee maker first, the one John had insisted on buying because it made the perfect cup every time. As I took my first sip of coffee in my new home, I looked down at my wedding ring and smiled. I did it, John, I whispered to the empty room that didn't feel quite so empty. I handled it. The real estate listing for my old house is still saved on my computer. Sometimes I look at it and read the description Janet wrote. Meticulously maintained home with updated kitchen and bathrooms, mature landscaping, and a warmth that only comes from years of being well loved. Janet got it right. Some things are worth exactly what they're worth, not a penny less. My home, my dignity, my ability to stand up for myself. Mark underestimated me because he saw only a grieving widow, too emotional to understand numbers. He never expected me to research market values, document his manipulation, involve a real estate attorney, or confront him publicly. The last I heard, Mark had moved to another state to restart his career. Trevor Daniels still flips houses in our area, but he now has a reputation for trying to undercut vulnerable sellers. And I have a new coffee mug that Lisa gave me as a housewarming gift. It reads, "Too emotional to understand numbers, too smart to be fooled." I drink from it every morning, and I think about how the biggest mistake Mark made wasn't the undervaluation or the secret deal with his friend. It was assuming that without John, I was somehow less capable, less intelligent, less worthy of respect. He thought my grief had weakened me, when in reality, it had given me a clarity I hadn't known I possessed. In the end, I didn't just save $80,000 on my home sale. I reclaimed something more valuable, the certainty that I could navigate this new chapter of my life on my own terms. Not because John had prepared me, or because my daughter stepped in, but because I had always been capable. Mark just made the mistake of being the first person to seriously underestimate me after John's death. He will certainly not be the last, but like the others who will follow, he learned an expensive lesson. Don't mistake my politeness for weakness, my grief for confusion, or my gender for a disadvantage. I may be a widow, but I'm not a victim, and I understand numbers just fine.